Before Olympian Dick Fosbury broke the world high jumping record in 1968, everyone had tackled the sport of high jumping using the same accepted technique, the frontal Western roll. However, in the Mexico Olympics, Fosbury endeavored to show the world a revolutionary way of jumping, one that no one before him had ever considered using. Instead of going over the bar front first, he created a discontinuity. He disrupted the high jumping continuum and went over the bar back first. But before Fosbury, it had never occurred to anyone that the high jump could be executed in any other way than from the front. It just required a reverse perspective. And so fast forward to today, and the convention continuum lives on. If you are a high jumper, what you learn is to jump with your back to the bar. You learn the Fosbury flop. Could it be time for a new discontinuity? If you are a human, you are a follower of convention. Coffee in the morning, noun before verb, ladies order first, greeting callers with hello, or greeting customers with how can I help you? Conventions are everywhere we turn. It's what we know. It's what we learn. The habitual ways and norms of life form an invisible web around our actions and the way that we think, without questioning their origins, their benefits, or the lack of them. In other words, we are so used to them that we are blind to them because we assume that, quote, this is just the way things are supposed to be. And when it comes to how we as leaders manage our teams, face the customer, market our products, or deal with vendors, the behavioral conventions that run our organizations on autopilot become so familiar, we or our employees or customers or vendors no longer even notice them. And because we don't notice them, we don't question them. Let's take marketing and advertising, for instance. Over time, nearly all companies and industries develop marketing and communication conventions. They follow the same unwritten rules. If you look at any particular category, they all sound the same and look the same features and benefits, same value propositions, and same better price promise. And for you, as a dental laboratory owner, do you feel like you're stuck, unable to stand out, trapped in a sea of oneness? If so, your problem is not as big as it seems. You just need to do what the great brands do. You need to do what the loyal brands do. And what they do is they create discontinuity. Brands that create isolation in the marketplace share a common principle. They have no respect for the status quo. These brands are obsessed with market conventions and execute on a vision that overturns that habitual behavior with a value disruption their market doesn't expect. And today on the podcast, my objective today is to nudge you towards a reverse perspective and the power of brand discontinuity. We're going to look at the discipline of unlearning and offer you some principles to help you uncover the conventions that will become the future catalysts for your own differentiated value propositions. My name is Sasha, and this is Entrepreneur Insight. We've all heard the saying, insanity is doing the same thing and expecting different results. But this is where most people in the world find themselves. They find themselves stuck in a bubble of unmet expectations, unclear perspectives, and no way out. Most people don't realize why and to what extent they always think in the same way and in the same pattern. And there are two reasons for this. The first is that our brains adopt our learned experiences and organize them into a belief system, which becomes the lens with which we see the world. And the second reason we are blind to convention is our brains are adaptive to social culture, thus making groupthink group belief. In other words, we are fashioned by cultural norms. And the reason is because our brains are amazing computers. And the algorithm locks in what we experience, providing us with neural pathways that enable us to learn quickly, make quick shortcut decisions, and to take action without thinking or having to relearn simple tasks or ideas. Now, conventions are not negative in and of themselves, but rather they are quite helpful for our everyday life. They're like useful shortcuts. Imagine having to literally plan every morning to brush your teeth. Our brains don't need to be faced with the exact same low value choices over and over again every single day. And so what happens is that these tracks of thinking begin to govern most of the decisions that we make, causing us to unknowingly repeat predictable behavior. And so because of our handed down experience of, let's say, having a glass of orange juice for breakfast, we learn and believe that orange juice is a morning drink. And what invariably happens to us as entrepreneurs is when we are faced with a situation we can't seem to differentiate ourselves out of, we know we simply cannot go on doing the same things we've always done. But we get frustrated. But we know that in order to be different, we can't be the same. And so to change, we reach and we plod down the same worn paths as others. When we're desperate for change, we reach out and cling to books and consultants for the widely held inside the box, one size fits all marketing in a box model. But what we forget is that running a business and growing one is essentially managing human networks, leaders, employees, customers, vendors, all with different skill sets, strengths, weaknesses. Meaning that not one business is the same. And the first thing we must unlearn is business as merely a structure. What we must learn is business at its very essence is a creative work. To be successful in today's conventional market, we can no longer use the same old recipes. We must abandon our habits and stop being afraid to disrupt the status quo. Please hear me. The status quo is not a peer group. It is a fear group. And there will be those few who will boldly use the power of a reverse perspective to harness their creativity to stand out from the crowd. Change, at its root meaning, is not more of the same. Change is discontinuous. True change that disrupts the continuum that isolates you in market-clearing fashion cannot follow a pattern. As an entrepreneur, a creator, your thinking must shift from straight and narrow to upside down, backward and forward, inside and out. The market that you and I are in is anything but predictable. The road to unlearning, the road to discontinuity, is then asking the question, why are we predictable? And I believe the reason is that creativity, discontinuity, is uncomfortable. That instead of taking the time to expose convention and then having the boldness to invest in a strategy that radically departs from the norm is intimidating. Not just intimidating, but impossible if you are not willing to adopt a paradigm to see the world in a reverse perspective. And the power of a reverse perspective brings more than a discovery of new knowledge. It displaces an entire network of knowledge. It's a radical shift. The overturning of one convention, say how you answer the phone, can lead to an insight that can transform how your customer sees you. But you first need to ask the question if, quote, ABC Dental Lab, how can I help you, is the best way for me to answer the phone. Is that the best way for me to create value at that touch point? And each time the lens of discontinuity is refocused or a conventional perspective is overturned, an inspired qualitative leap is sparked. And by default, these ruptures in thinking give new birth to inspiring visions, a fresh opportunity, refreshing creativity that can inspire you and your team in ways that position your brand to grow. If you fear commodity and the impending race to the bottom is driving, then perhaps you haven't tried your hand at questioning the established norms around how you are servicing your customer and the behavioral innovation that is available to you. Let's look at advertising for a minute. Very little has changed since the creative revolution of the 1960s, led by the likes of David Ogilvy or Bill Bernbach or Mary Wells. All of these were unlearners and all discontinuitists, if that's even a word. Especially in the age of cancel culture, most have latched on to a new woke conventional ideology that is ruling the culture. And where they feel maybe that they are being different because they are different from who they were in the past, they are not radically standing out, only mildly blending in. Advertising is a great way to deploy discontinuity, but it requires a cutting-edge thinking capacity, radical, inherent questioning of what is supposed to be. And in addition, you have to be unafraid to change and unafraid of rejection. Not only does discontinuity require upside-down thinking, questioning, and boldness to step out, it also is highly dependent on strategic posture. And a posture of discontinuity can either be brand-driven or market-driven. When a posture is brand-driven, the brand's DNA, its personality, and the values of the brand are itself the discontinuity. Their brand behavior is from the inside out. The discontinuity is the culture that it starts inside and spills into the market by way of behavior at the customer level. By contrast, when a brand assesses the world around it and as a result transforms its value proposition to the market to meet the need of that customer base, its discontinuity can be said to be created from the outside in. Now, as an example, let me use Harvest Dental as one who is postured inside out. Harvest sees and understands that its core product, that our core product is not just tangible, but intangible. Quote, the brand as product philosophy, where a strong internal value system that is communicated guides us towards executing on a clear purpose to refresh the customer. And knowing that to refresh means to cut across a current state of being, this notion drives our innovation through the product touch point and transcends into the human experience touch point. This would be considered an inside-out posture. Now, as an example of an outside-in posture, I think Glidewell Dental is a good example. They have positioned their discontinuity through vertical integration. They create a discontinuous workflow, integrations, let's say vertical material manufacturing, manufacturing their own raw materials, their own prosthetic materials. And they do that to deploy their promise of speed, quality, and support at an affordable cost. Their product is not their prosthetic. Their product is their infrastructure. And this is outside in because they continue to evolve their business model, which is their product, based on where they see the customer's value targets shift. And for you, how will you stand out? How will you get heard? How will you differentiate yourself in a marketplace that is screaming the same features and benefits? the same value propositions, the same stats, the same better price promise. And the dental lab industry is trending towards greater levels of commoditization. And many of you may fear the inevitable race to the bottom, and understandably so. But please, if you hear anything, I want you to fear not and be encouraged, because there has never been a greater opportunity to differentiate yourself in the market. If you study market dynamics, you'll understand that the commoditization of any industry will always share a common thread: a diminished perception of value. This thinking is a convention. Over time, the marketing communication and the touch point experience becomes so entrenched in the status quo that the market invariably finds itself in that trap, that sea of oneness. There is such a prolonged lack of emotional value that price becomes the market's main value differentiator. And that, my friends, is to our advantage. Because a subtle blindness has set in. Highly predictable ways of doing business that are so static and familiar, the customer no longer even notices them. The customer is behaving in a subconscious state. We have an opportunity to make them conscious about us and our brand and our value system. And these, my friends, are called market conventions. And to your lab, they will serve as the catalyst for your own brand discontinuity. This is great news, because differentiation needs a catalyst to differentiate against. And there you have it. Market conventions serve as those departure points for a valuable brand intrusion that you can deploy. To differentiate yourself, you need to overturn what is customary, because the status quo behavior reveals where the market is stuck. Opportunities are everywhere. Study what everybody else is doing. Identify where the market is stuck so you can create value that is dynamic. All we have to do is think with a reverse perspective. All we have to do is, as Apple famously said, think differently. See you on the next edition of Entrepreneur Insight. Have a great day.